Okay, so we're back and looking at the NBBC BB code parser. In this part of the video, we are going to look at detecting URLs, which is an extremely useful part of posting. If you have a forum and a user posts a link, you may want that link to be automatically converted as such to a link that a user can click on. Now this is extremely, not difficult, but extremely funny in the way it works if you were to do this yourself. So the best way to do it is to use NBBC because it does it absolutely flawlessly. So what we're going to do is here I'm just going to say http:// and the link to google.co.uk. So what's going to happen here is when we go ahead and refresh, we've just got a plain text. We can't obviously click on it, there's no link, it's just text. Nothing's been passed because we haven't got any BB codes in here. Now the first option would be for your users to use the link BB code. However, this would mean that if I refresh, link equals HTTP. Now, the problem with this is it relies on your users. It's URL. So URL. So we could change this, for example, to just Google and refresh. Now that would create a link to Google. If we click on it, we'll go through to Google and with the text Google. Or the user could just specify the URL tag with the link, like so, and that will also take us through to Google. Now the problem with this is that this means that the user has to enter these URL tags. There's no two ways about it. They have to include these URL tags, and the problem there is that you then have to depend on your users to do this every single time. Now, what we can actually do is we can use a method called setDetectURLs, and we can either pass true or false. By default, it'll be false, but what this means is it will automatically detect URLs. So before our output and before we actually pass, we can use BB. Now the method name is setDetectURLs. And in here we can pass true or false. As I said, it's already false, so we don't need to use this method or call this method if we're setting it false. It doesn't make sense. And what's going to happen here is it's going to automatically detect this URL and convert it to a link. So when I refresh, it's automatically been changed to a link. You can see the markup here. We've got an anchor tag, then we've got an href attribute with the link. So it works perfectly and goes through to Google. So that's a really interesting part about this as well, that we don't actually have to depend on the user to use the link tag. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is looking at smileys. Now smileys are automatically enabled by default. If you need to disable them for any reason, you can go ahead over to the manual and check out the method that allows you to disable smileys. The manual also gives you information on how you can add your own smileys in here as well. But for now, this is just essentially going to be converted to a smiley face. Now remember earlier we looked at the smileys pack here. So I'm not sure whether it's just the normal happy faces. But what this is going to do is this will automatically convert this to an image tag, and then it will give you that smiley out. So when I refresh, you see that we've got this little smiley here, and you can see here we've got image source and then the path to the image. We've got width, height, and the alt and the title, which is again important. We've also got a class as well, so we can change this BB code underscore smiley. We can make it different widths, heights, etc. So that's essentially images in a nutshell. Really, really easy to do. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding our own tag. So we're going to be creating a rule. We're going to use the add rule method, and we're going to create a BB code of our own, which is important if you need to, for example, front end, you may have some kind of JavaScript syntax highlighter. You may need a specific element that allows a user to post code, and then you'd have to wrap this code in a certain element. So we'll be using add rule, and this is really great to experiment with. The example I'm giving is, somewhat boring. So BB add rule. Now what we're going to do here is I'm going to create a string and a comma, Now I'm going to ignore this for now. I'm going to create an array here, and then we'll go ahead and fill this in a moment, and it will make a lot more sense. So I'm going to create an array here, or pass through an array. I'm going to come down a couple of lines and start to add some elements to this array, which are going to be read by the MBBC BBcode parser. So the first is simple underscore start. Now this is just how this element is going to start when it is converted from a BB code to actual markup. So I'm going to create pre-class PHP. And I'll try and explain as best as I can why I'm doing this in a moment. So simple end, so I'm just going to indent just so it's a bit neater. And I'm going to end that pre-formatted tag there. So basically a pre-formatted tag just takes into account line breaks, things like that, without any additional markup. But the most important thing here is class is equal to PHP. If we have some front-end JavaScript syntax highlighter, we might want to say pre.php and then pass the method for that syntax highlighter, and it would highlight the entire syntax contained within here. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to say output is equal to, and we're going to say PHP echo some PHP code, and I'll just go ahead and escape that and escape that. So this might be your user's output. What this would do is it would wrap it in PHP, a pre with a class of PHP, and end the pre tag at the end. Now there's a couple of other elements we can add here, and I'll explain them as best I can. The first one is class. This is more for semantics. In this case, it's going to be block. Now, the reason it's block is for things like the color and the bold and italics, they're all inline. And that's because they're displayed next to text. If there's any text, you don't want that to break down. So we'll provide a class here. And we also have allow in, which does feed back an error if you don't supply this. And this is basically, is it allowed within any other BB codes? So for example, is it allowed within bold like that? Well, in this case, I don't want it to be within anything. I'm just going to pass in null. Okay, so now let's go ahead and test our output. The only thing that we've missed out is this first parameter that we passed to add rule method, and that is the the BB code tag, which is just going to be PHP. Now that would essentially look like that, but we don't need to pass in them. We just pass in the name here. So when we pass this, let's go ahead and look at what happens. So refresh, there we go. Nothing interesting, but if I inspect it, you can see that we've now got a pre-formatted tag with a class of PHP. We've got the PHP code inside, and then we end the pre. So we could use this to syntax highlight anything, any pre-tag with a class of PHP. Okay, so that's the end of the second part. In the third part of this tutorial series, we're going to look at something really fun, which is creating our own advanced rule, an enhanced rule, and it's going to allow us to pass in a YouTube video ID and actually go ahead and inject that video onto the page.